Good morning, everybody. Hope you're having a great morning. Welcome to another episode of OP Radio. I'm your host, Mac. We have another great guest with you today to talk about what they're building in the Optimism ecosystem. Before we allow them to introduce themselves, though, I am joined by a colleague of mine. She's been on OP Radio before. How are you doing, Vivian? Good morning.
Good morning. Actually, it's evening for me. So good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Nice to see everyone on here again.
Yeah, great to have you back, Vivian. It's always morning somewhere, right?
Exactly. It's also time for a beer somewhere as well.
Ooh, that sounds good. Might be a little early for me, but please enjoy one for me. Okay, so and then the guest we have today is Andy. I'm just going to let him introduce himself. How you doing this morning, Andy?
I am good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, my name's Andy Bromberg. I'm the CEO of Beam and the Eco app, and a contributor to the Eco currency protocol. And super excited to chat about all of that and optimism and everything going on.
Yeah, well, we're super excited to have you, Andy. Thank you for joining us. Before we get into Beam and what it is, what it does, I always like to ask guests a little bit about their personal history, how they got into crypto, what life before crypto was like, if such a thing exists. So, Andy, would you mind sharing just a little bit of your background and history with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Life before crypto certainly existed. I am more than 15 years old, so been around before that. I got into crypto when I was in university. So I went to Stanford. I was studying math and computer science there. And I had this professor named, many of you are probably familiar with, named Balaji Srinivasan, who went on to found Earn.com and was partnered with Andreessen Horowitz and the CTO of Coinbase, and recently kind of famously made that $1 million Bitcoin bet on hyperinflation. But back in 2012, he was my professor at Stanford, and he taught a class. And a number of us after the class were spending a lot of time together, and Balaji was really pitching us that this Bitcoin thing was going to be a big deal. And again, this was in 2012. So not super early, but fairly early in the Bitcoin space. And Balaji convinced us, 7 of us, to start what became the Stanford Bitcoin group studying Bitcoin back in 2012. And so that was a really cool experience. And I was fortunate to have that even before I left university. So pretty early in my life. And I've spent a lot of time in the space since then. But that was about a decade ago.
Wow, a student of Balaji. That is very cool. What a small world it is, huh?
Yeah, it really is.
Okay, and so then it sounds like you got crypto pilled by Balaji, and then you started working in the space. I believe you founded another company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
It was CoinList, right?
Yeah, so actually I started another company first. I left Stanford, started a company in the media space, in the political media space called Sidewire, and ran that for 3 years. And then we wound that down, and I co-founded CoinList, which some of you are probably familiar with. CoinList got started back in 2017 and spun out of AngelList. And the way CoinList came to be was that the Protocol Labs team, who was building the early Filecoin ecosystem, and IPFS, the technology that Filecoin supports, Protocol Labs was preparing to run a token sale for Filecoin, and they needed help with the infrastructure and compliance and all of those things. And so they went to AngelList and said, hey, you all are the leaders in online fundraising. Can you help us do this compliantly? So AngelList and Protocol Labs started working together on the Filecoin token sale, and they realized smartly, hey, actually, this is probably a real business, and a lot of protocols will probably need this exact same set of services, and this should probably be its own company. And so they made the decision to spin CoinList out of AngelList back in 2017, and I, along with 4 other co-founders, co-founded that new independent CoinList entity and ran it. And I ran it for 3 years, and we had a bunch of amazing projects that we supported, Solana and Cello and Flow and a ton of others. And that was a really fun experience for a few years there, from 2017 to 2020 for me. And then obviously CoinList is still going strong without me involved at that same level anymore.
Nice. So from 2017 for 3 years to 2020 at CoinList, and then bring us up to speed to the current date. So maybe take us with the founding of Beam and why you got interested in this global payments wallet. Why you think this is a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a little backstory there. So Eco, this project originally got started back in 2017, at the same time I was starting CoinList, and it was getting started, and I helped kind of pull together some of the initial team members and advise on early strategy and help put it together. But I was actually not running it at the time. I was off running CoinList. My co-founders, Ryan Sachs and Henry Alt, were running running Eco themselves. And there was a lot of R&D. We can talk later about what Eco is, but in short, it's a decentralized currency protocol, an independent alternative to stablecoins, attempting to build something that's independent and unpegged, but also usable for payments, a kind of truly crypto native currency. And we can talk more about that. But that was the original vision for Eco. Along the way, we and Ryan Henry and the rest of the team kind of realized, well, wait, you can design and build a beautiful currency and help support it and see this decentralized ecosystem flourish. But if there aren't ways for people to get and use this currency, then what have you really done? And there has to be opportunities for these real world use cases. And the first product aiming to kind of build these better payment products and opportunities to eventually on-ramp people into an on-chain world was the Eco app, which is ecoapp.com. It's a US-based consumer fintech product that replaces your bank with something better and intended to eventually serve as an on-ramp to an on-chain world. And so we built that and are still building that, and that product is doing well. And then recently, as a bunch of technology came together that we can talk more about, we realized there was an opportunity to build yet another payment product on-chain, one that was global and self-custodial and could also drive adoption of on-chain payments. And that became the Beam wallet, which we'll spend some time talking about, I think. And the last thing, I guess, just for historical context that I kind of skipped over is that in 2020, I left CoinList and came over and joined Eco Inc. as CEO to run this company along with Ryan and Henry. And the reason I did that was because I was just looking at it and thinking, this project for me is exactly why crypto exists in the first place. When I got into Bitcoin in 2012, and Balaji was getting us involved in Bitcoin, the original vision of the technology, at least for me, was and is competitive currencies. It was, hey, is there a possibility to build a better financial system and alternative competitive currencies and financial assets? And that's what got me into the space. That's what I think the space really exists for at its most fundamental level, to really change the global financial system. But it felt to me like over the decade or so since the Bitcoin white paper at that point, most of the innovation in the space had not been around that. I was just going to say that it makes sense. It's the kind of leading AngelList, really cornered the market on online compliant fundraising. And so
yeah,
it was just
totally.
a really natural fit for the Protocol Labs team to partner with them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, like AngelList has been around for a long time, and CoinList is like natural evolution of that. So I'm curious, like, are there any learnings that you took from your time at CoinList into leading the Eco team and like building Beam and the Eco app?
Oh, I mean, so many learnings. I mean, I think a lot of the biggest things that I learned about at CoinList with respect to kind of what works and what doesn't in the crypto space is the need for no bullshit, real community. People who are actually involved and care about a project because of that project's principles and values and what it's trying to achieve, and aren't there, as mercenaries, but are there because they believe in what that project is trying to achieve. And not every single person is a perfect fit for every single project's community or vice versa. That's totally fine. But what I found over and over again was that projects that had people in their community who really cared about what they were trying to achieve, those are the projects that are able to succeed. Those are the projects that, are truly decentralized in a meaningful way. And those are the projects that fulfill, I think, the ideals of crypto. So that's a really big learning for me. There's lots of other ones. I think a huge takeaway for me was a lot of projects in crypto promise things and then underdeliver. And well, that's really tempting always for people to say these amazing things are going to happen and then just kind of see what happens from there. I don't think it's an effective long-term strategy. And so really winding back and saying, hey, as I'm trying to build something in crypto here and support something in crypto here, let's underpromise and overdeliver. Let's, not say things until we're certain they're going to happen, and let's try and do it in a different model, and let's try to be truly decentralized with a real community. And I think that that's what works if you have a long view, which not everyone in the space does, and that's also fine. But for those who do, I think those are critical learnings.
Yeah, action should always match the words, right? Thank you for that history, Andy. It sounds like you've really come full circle, pun intended, from being Bitcoin pilled by Balaji at Stanford to then working in the stablecoin space to then realizing, well, people need to be able to send these stablecoins to one another and founding Beam. So with that, let's transition to what Beam is and what the value proposition is there. You mentioned real world use case. I've been asked this question before. I'm sure you have as well, Andy. People are like, what's the real world use case of crypto? And one answer I always say is remittance payments. Mm-hmm. So, transnational global payments that you can send for pennies on the dollar almost instantaneously. And that seems to be something that Beam has really narrowed in on. Would you care to expand on that and any thoughts there on this real world use case?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for us, one way to talk about Beam in kind of the simplest form is on-chain Venmo. It is an incredibly simple, user-friendly, mainstream adoptable way to send funds anywhere in the world to anyone instantly, and to do it in a self-custodial way that preserves the ideals of the space, decentralization and permissionlessness and censorship resistance. And so ultimately Beam is for payments. It's a really narrow wallet aiming to be just the easiest way on the planet for anyone to send anyone money. And there's so many use cases for that, right? That at the end of the day, payments are how, this is almost self-explanatory, but payments are how value moves around the world. Value is what drives innovation and progress and the advancement of society. And so if you can make payments easier and lower friction and cheaper and more globally supported, then that solves a real problem. And so I think that certainly remittances in the traditional world are one of the highest friction traditional world payments. They're painful. They sometimes involve going to physical places. They are high fee. They can be really hard. And so a lot of crypto for many years, people have been thinking about, hey, the remittance use case in crypto. And I think that's certainly a big one for Beam, that it enables these instant low fee global payments, but also just independently any sort of payment that people want to make, whether it's within their own country or across borders or whatever. That should all be much easier. You shouldn't have limits on your money. You should be in full control of your money. All of that should be true. And I think it's now possible with today's technology to go and build that. It's funny, actually, just because we were talking about my history. One of the projects that got worked on in the Stanford Bitcoin group back in 2013, two of my co-founders in that group were John Backus and Alan Meyer, who founded a company called Cognito that recently sold to Plaid. And a project that they worked on was a Bitcoin remittance product back in 2013. But what they ultimately found was that it just wasn't really feasible at that time with the current technology in a way that was effective and could work and could actually be 10 times better than existing remittance solutions. And so there was this knowledge even at that time in 2012, 2013, that crypto had the primitives to solve our remittance problem, but perhaps the actual pieces weren't there yet to make the experience good enough to make it mass market. And so it feels really good to be here a decade later and trying to fulfill that vision.
Yeah, I just want to restate this because it's a very simple but a very powerful concept. The concept that you and I, Andy, or you and anybody else can transfer value between one another without a third party or an intermediary. I think it's, this just intuitively makes sense. It should be that easy. If you and I want to be able to transfer value between one another, we should be able to do that very easily in the digital age. And yet a lot of people are still paying a lot of money and working with these legacy systems if they want to transfer that value.
Absolutely. I mean, I would really encourage everyone, if you haven't read it recently, I think everyone should be doing this if you're in the space every 6 or 12 months, go back and reread the Bitcoin white paper. Short, it's 8 pages long. And on the first page of the Bitcoin white paper, the very first page in the introduction, it talks about exactly this problem, that internet commerce, I don't have it up in front of me right now, but internet commerce relies on intermediaries, these institutions that process electronic payments, and that creates all sorts of costs and problems with payments because these central parties have to mediate disputes between users. They have to allow for reversals. They have to do all these things. Fraud is a reality. So the existence of third parties in the middle of every digital payment method creates problems, and you can avoid those. And this is what Satoshi said, by using physical currency, by handing someone physical currency where there's no intermediary. But up until Bitcoin, there just wasn't a mechanism to allow for that to happen digitally. And that is the fundamental innovation that Bitcoin created. By the way, I am still a massive Bitcoin bull personally, and have a lot of my personal net worth in Bitcoin because of this vision. I think it's right. But I think the reality is that for most people who want to transact in stable or reasonably stable value currencies, who want to be able to do it in an interface that is really easy, that vision that Satoshi painted just wasn't really possible until very recently. And despite it being absolutely right and workable for a certain set of people that were sufficiently sophisticated, it just couldn't yet be brought to the masses. And it feels like right now in this cycle, finally, we're turning the corner on that and being able to build products that anyone can use.
One of the things I was really impressed by when, Andy, you first demoed Beam to me was that the simplicity of Beam really lends to what you guys have set the vision to do, right? Which is building something for remittances, and you have it very clearly in your docs that, users shouldn't be holding significant funds in their Beam, right? And it's really meant to be this like change purse for payments. Can you talk a little bit more about like the design decisions that you had to make and like some of the trade-offs that you considered in order to create this kind of experience?
Yes. I mean, there's so many, right? And there's so many trade-offs. And by the way, obviously still a lot of building left for us to do. Beam's great already, but there's a lot of things that we need to do. We set out a little bit of a product philosophy for this Beam wallet. So like Vivian said, it's really, really simple. It's really easy to use. In fact, it's as simple as just texting someone a link with money on it. So Beam supports USDC and it also supports the eco currency, which we can talk more about, and may support other assets soon. If you want to send someone currency, either USDC or eco, and you have it in Beam, you can create a link. And that link gives access to a smart contract. The funds get sent into a smart contract. You text someone the link, email someone the link, signal someone the link, whatever. And they tap the link and they instantly have a Beam wallet with money in it. So it's really simple. But that simplicity comes with trade-offs. And so, this product philosophy that we laid out internally had a few pieces, really, really 4 pieces. And I'll just go through them quickly here. But I do think it's interesting to get a view into this. One is that we wanted to build Beam to be opinionated and inflexible, but with a permissionless opt-out. So what we mean by that is Beam has this really simple user experience and really strong guardrails. It is not intended to be a general wallet that can do anything, connect to any dApp, do anything you want in crypto, which is what you're used to from MetaMask and Coinbase Wallet and Frame. It's meant to be really opinionated and inflexible with complexity abstracted away and things hidden, which I know is a little bit kind of verboten in crypto sometimes. But we were only comfortable with that, which makes it much easier for people to use, because we also insisted on permissionless opt-out, which means that users must always be able to permissionlessly leave Beam for another wallet without any roadblocks. If they want more control or visibility, they can get it somewhere else. But in Beam, it's going to be really simple and opinionated and inflexible. So that was one kind of set of trade-offs we made. Hey, we're going to limit what you can do in here to make it easy, but you're going to be able to leave whenever you want. The second piece of product philosophy is that Beam is purpose-built for payments. Beam is built for payments. It's a payments wallet. Over time, maybe you'll be able to do more from it, but its core is payments and it'll remain so. So Beam is not meant to be, a cold storage wallet. It's not meant to be a place where you hold your life savings. It's not meant to be a place where you use it to interact with all sorts of complicated on-chain things. Beam is for payments. It's narrow. It's purpose-built. And so that results in some trade-offs. You can't do everything, but it also allows us to make it much simpler. Third thing is Beam works under a paradigm that we call an account for an app or an account for a dApp. In crypto, what we're all really used to, I think probably all of us in this call, if we're listening to OP Radio, is a separation of accounts and apps, right? I have, a wallet in MetaMask or Frame, and I then interact with apps like Uniswap or Aave or Compound or any of them. And my account is separate from those apps. That, I have a single account and then I interact with all these different apps. And if I go to those apps, I don't create an account on that app. I have an account when I come to it and I bring my account to the app. And that makes sense to us in crypto. And it's really powerful. And I love that paradigm. But for mainstream users, that's very unfamiliar for a lot of people. And so Beam returns to the Web 2 paradigm a little bit, giving you a purpose-built account or wallet for the Beam app or dApp. And again, it's permissionless opt-out. You can take it anywhere you want. You can take it out of Beam. But when you go to beam.eco, which is the URL, you instantly have a wallet on Beam. You don't need to bring your own. And so for mainstream users, that just makes way more sense. They're like, oh, I show up to this app and I get an account. It's just like, when I download Twitter or X, I create a Twitter X account. When I download whatever app, I create an account. That's much more familiar for people. And then the last product philosophy kind of principle that we had when building Beam is that it should make people say wow, but also be crypto for real. And what that means is that Beam is meant to be the first payments experience people have that they've had in quite a while, where they say, whoa. Most of the time payments are not an impressive thing. Paying someone doesn't feel like a wow moment. But we want to make Beam an experience where you pay someone for the first time in it and you say, whoa, that was really cool. That was a cool payment experience. But at the same time, Beam has to respect all that is true to crypto: permissionlessness, censorship resistance, true ownership, all of those things. We cannot sacrifice those attributes. So, we have this philosophy, and that's guided how we've built it. It comes with trade-offs, but I think that's inevitable. And if you try to be everything to everyone, then you end up with an unfocused product that doesn't really serve these new mainstream audiences that need to use crypto products for the first time.
Yeah, it's interesting, Andy. I'd love to hear your take on, a lot of the wallets in the space seem to have taken a different approach where they're a lot more broad and they have a lot of different uses. You've taken this firm stance that you're going to have this one narrow specific use case, and you kind of answered this, but yeah, it's just interesting to see the decisions that these other wallets have taken, and kind of where the space has wound up. And you seem to at Beam, you're like, no, this is. And I guess it's somewhat mitigated by the fact that it is a payments wallet only, right? So you're not meant to store your crypto in here, all your crypto. It's just to transfer value back and forth.
Yeah, that's right. It's not that Beam is better than those other wallets, right? That the analogy I use sometimes is if you have, let's say you have a screw loose on a chair in your house or something, there's in the wall, there's some screw loose. Well, sure, you could bring a whole set of expensive power tools to fix that screw. Or sometimes you just want a screwdriver that does one thing. It's really simple. It does it really well. And it's very narrow. And maybe you wouldn't use it to build a house with a million screws. But if you got one screw loose, then yeah, the screwdriver is actually probably the best solution rather than going and getting a whole power tool. And I think of Beam like a screwdriver. It's a really simple product. It does payments really well, and that's it. And for some of us, like myself, I still need power tools, right? I'm a crypto power user. So I need my hardware wallets, my Ledger and Lattice Grid Plus, and my, hot wallets and MetaMask and Frame and all of these things. I need all of those things because I do complicated things on chain sometimes, but most people in the world don't. And they don't need the full set of power tools. And those are just kind of competing for totally different use cases. It's all about just having the right tool. And I think that one of the roadblocks in mainstream adoption of on-chain payments has been these wallets. It's like if you walk up to random people on the street and you handed them power tools and you're like, go start building stuff, and they get freaked out. They're like, all right, there's all these buttons, there's a safety lock, I got to charge a battery, I need a battery charger, all these different things. Most people don't need that. They just need a screwdriver, and that's fine. And that's the philosophy we've taken with building Beam.
Yeah, no need to overcomplicate it, right? You just need the right tool for the right job.
That's right.
One of the things I was just like double click into, because, if you open Beam, there's not a single mention of network, right? Like if you open MetaMask, the first thing you see is like a little button that says network, and you have to, sometimes put in your endpoint and et cetera, et cetera. So, and maybe it's helpful for listeners that maybe haven't played around with Beam yet to like verbally explain that experience of what that payment and transferring of assets looks like, and why you guys decided to abstract and remove away the network from the entire experience.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, so when you use Beam, like we just said, there's no network. If you go to beam.eco, you have USDC or eco in there. You get some, you can buy some through partners or deposit yourself. Right now, all of that eco and the USDC is on Optimism. It's all on Optimism. And very soon, it'll also be optionally on Base. Beam will support both Optimism and Base. And we can talk more about this, but we consider Beam a kind of super chain wallet is the goal that we have. And the way it works is that users don't need to worry about the network. They don't need to switch networks. They don't need to enter RPC endpoints. They don't need to do any of that. Beam simply aggregates your funds in supported tokens across all networks that we support, which right now is just Optimism. Very soon will be Base, and of course, working on more. And Beam shows you your combined balance across those networks. So let's say in a few weeks, let's say you have 20 USDC in there on Optimism, and you've got 10 USDC in there on Base. Beam will just show you 30 USDC. No need to worry about it being on different networks or anything. Again, Beam is just for payments. So it's kind of narrow and some of this complexity is abstracted away. And let's say I go and I want to send Vivian 25 USDC. I go and Beam says I have 30. I type in 25. I hit send to Vivian either through her username or a link or scan her code. And we can talk more about how you send on Beam, but I would send it to her and Beam would automatically help the user initiate, without them needing to click through any pop-ups or anything, one transaction on Optimism and one transaction on Base. So 20 USDC would be sent on Optimism, 5 USDC would be sent on Base, and Vivian would receive 25 USDC. There's no need for a user to worry about that. And we just think it doesn't matter to users, again, of a simple payments wallet. It matters a lot if you're a sophisticated user who's using power tools. But if you're using a screwdriver, if you're using a simple product, they don't care which network it's on. They just want the money to send. They want to send 25 USDC to their friend. That's it. And Beam initiates both of these. And again, I think we'll talk probably more about the technology that enables this, but this is possible because of account abstraction, ERC 4337, and this idea of smart contract wallets, as well as some other recent technology. And we just think it's much simpler that way and much easier for users. And as we continue to scale out and add more superchain chains or other networks, it will just remain this simple. And users simply will not have to think about the network that they're on. Beam will just smartly route the transaction however it needs to.
I think it's important to point out for people that may not be as experienced in crypto that, a lot of the wallet experiences now, you go in and it's rather clunky because you have an account that you need to, with that account, you also need to have an associated network with it. So you're basically, you're confronted with a lot of different options, which creates a lot of complexity. And what Andy is saying is they've just abstracted all of that away for this one use case, which is you want to send USDC, you want to transfer value to someone. Let's make it as easy and simple and straightforward as possible.
That's exactly right. And I think that there's a reality here. We are at Eco broadly and at Beam specifically, we're incredibly excited about the superchain vision and really committed to that superchain vision because we think it's the right way to scale Ethereum. But the superchain vision does come with challenges that need to be solved. And one of the big challenges is a UX challenge. If we end up with 10 chains, 20 chains, 1,000 chains through this kind of horizontally scaling superchain infrastructure, we can't expect everyday users to intelligently themselves switch between different chains and use different chains. That's just not a reasonable ask of most users. Today this chain, chain that's part of the super chain is congested. I'm going to go to this other one. I'm going to go to this different one. I'm going to add this RPC endpoint. People won't do that. And so I think that there are UX challenges, and Beam is one attempt at that to try to solve for this. Yes, it's the right scaling approach, but that also needs to come with new kind of product flows and new paradigms to interact with that scaling methodology.
Yeah, in a sense, Beam is almost looking forward to the future superchain, right? Where these blockchains are no longer siloed and this stuff is abstracted away.
That's exactly right. Yeah, to be clear, Beam is not itself the superchain, right? The superchain is this technical vision we're working towards of these blockchains actually deeply interoperating with each other and working on shared infrastructure, shared decentralized infrastructure. And Beam is not that, but Beam is saying that, there are these different chains that will be a part of the superchain and intend to be a part of the superchain. Let's start allowing users to transact across those today and give them the experience of what the superchain can and should be like, even before all of that technical infrastructure is built.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, Andy. I wonder if we could dive into sort of all the progress that has been made up to date that is enabling this to occur, right? I think we're sort of in a unique moment. Something like Beam may not have been possible as close as a year ago. So there's a lot of stuff like I'm thinking of like ERC 4337, roll-ups, stuff like that. I wonder if you could just speak to that of how this has only become possible fairly recently.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly right. We are really proud of what we've built at Beam, and we built a lot of infrastructure and a lot of product to make it as easy and smooth as it is. But really, we're standing on the shoulders of giants here, and there's a lot of technology that's only really become production ready or launched, even in the last few months, that enables Beam to do this. And this is why part of why we're so excited about this. We realized a few months ago wow, we actually think this seamless mainstream on-chain Venmo payment experience could be possible thanks to this new technology. I would say that there's kind of two big rocks that have enabled that, and then a number of smaller things I can speak to as well. The two big things are, one, obviously just the rise of Optimism, low cost roll-ups, and opportunities to send transactions at a cost structure that actually makes sense to mainstream users. And first of all, I'm very excited about what comes next. I think we're all looking forward to EIP 4844 and proto dank sharding and costs continuing to come down for transactions on rollups like Optimism. But the way I describe it to people right now is that it costs somewhere between cents and tens of cents to send a transaction on Optimism or soon Base and other rollups right now. And that is on par with the cost structure of credit card transaction fees. Credit card transaction fees most of the time are something on the order of 2.5 or 3% of a transaction size plus 10 or 15 or 20 cents, and that's roughly where rollups are right now. So we're now in a world where even before 4844, even before intelligently doing things like BLS signature aggregation or any of these other scaling and cost compression structures, we're in range of traditional payments now for the first time, and that's really exciting. So that has enabled this payment experience, because if we built Beam, but each transaction costs $4, that probably would not do the trick for building on-chain Venmo. And then the other thing that really has enabled this is ERC 4337, which I think most people have probably heard about, but it's this idea of account abstraction and smart contract wallets. And that enables a bunch of really interesting things. Basically, all of Beam is built on top of this technology. It only launched really within the last few months. It launched this year in even a pretty minimal form, and it enables a bunch of things. Probably the most important thing it enables for Beam is users pay fees for their transaction in the currency that they are sending. So you do not need ETH in your wallet if you are sending USDC. And this, for me, has always been it's one of the biggest roadblocks when I've talked about on-chain payments to people who aren't in the crypto space. Saying to them, great, you can transfer USDC, you can transfer this stable value pegged asset to anyone all around the world. But by the way, you need to have this other asset, Ethereum, in your wallet just to transfer that asset. And as much as I love Ethereum, that is confusing and is a non-starter for a lot of people that have a more minimal need of, I want to transfer stable pegged value. And account abstraction in ERC 4337 allows that to be abstracted. In fact, in Beam, it's abstracted all the way to users paying these pass-through fixed fees in the currency they're sending. So the fees are fixed around the average of on-chain transaction fees, which makes it even easier for people to understand that a USDC transaction is 50 cents on Beam and an eco transaction is 20 eco on Beam. And it's just really, really simple and straightforward. And that unblocks it, because otherwise, imagine you're trying to build on-chain Venmo with USDC and this technology does not exist. Well, let's say, Vivian's not on the network yet, and I send her 25 USDC. Well, unless she gets ETH into that wallet, those funds are stuck there. So either I need to send her ETH along with the USDC, or she needs to get ETH from somewhere else in order to send the funds onward, and that just does not work. But with Beam, and with account abstraction powering it, it's then possible in Beam to do it in the token you're sending, which I think unblocks one of the biggest problems with on-chain payments. So those are the two really big things. There's a bunch of smaller things as well that are parts of Beam, but that's what has enabled this experience at the highest level.
Yeah, it's almost like, imagine if you were renting a car, and the car being a metaphor for Beam, a payments wallet. You just want to send value to someone. You rent this car and it's delivered to you without gas. So effectively, you can't really do anything with it. And what Andy is saying is, no, you should be able to use the thing immediately, regardless of what asset you have.
I'm stealing that analogy. That's a great one. Exactly right.
That's a really good analogy. I think one of the really exciting things I think about the super chain vision is we're seeing this space. We're at this place in this in crypto where you have all of these different chains, right? Whether it's L2s or alt L1s, and it's causing a lot of challenges, not just with user experience, but also with builders, right? There's fragmented liquidity. There's builders trying to figure out how to do multi-chain, et cetera, et cetera. And, we don't really have that many people on blockchain using crypto yet. And the super chain is kind of like one small step in getting, billions of people using this technology, right? And I feel like Beam is actually quite a big step into that like larger vision. But I'm curious, I'm completely bought into Beam and what it could do, but like tangibly, what is your kind of go-to-market strategy? Like, how are you planning on getting adoption? How are you planning on kind of letting folks actually benefit from what you have built?
Yeah, it's a great question. One answer to that is just plain old marketing. When you've got a product that is legitimately better than existing products, you just need people to see it and try it, and then they have that experience. And I had a really cool experience. The reception from the crypto community for Beam has been incredible. Tens of thousands of people signing in, saving their wallets, using it even just in the first few days, and just a lot of support online, and it's been awesome to see. But the thing that I'm even more excited about is seeing people that are not crypto native using it. And so, I showed Beam to some family members this past weekend who are not crypto savvy, far from it, really barely even internet savvy at some level. And when I showed them the possibility of texting digital dollars in USDC via a link to someone else, them being able to open that and instantly have it themselves without creating an account, without doing anything, they just instantly have it. You don't need to worry about if the other person has that app or anything like that. No download required. And then that person being able to send it on, they looked at me and they're like, this is way better than Venmo. This is better than Zelle. This is great. This is exactly what I want to use. I want to start using this thing. And I think that the best way for a product like this to spread is through word of mouth, people just sending each other payments. And one of the things that I think is so powerful about growing Beam is exactly what I just said. There's no download required, no sign up required. You simply just text someone a link, they open the link and they have their money. And so a lot of other products that grow via these kind of peer-to-peer interactions, they suffer from kind of a friction problem that either the recipient already needs to be on the app, or maybe you can send them an invite to join the app, but then they, click the invite, they see they have to download another app, they download the app, they go through some process, they submit invasive personal details, they, do all of these things only to finally receive your payment. And that makes it really hard to grow these things virally, even in the Web 2 world. And so I think the ease of use of Beam, if we can, light a little bit of a fire and get people to start to send payments this way, it'll just spread naturally in addition to our marketing efforts there.
I agree with you, Andy. That friction is just too high at the moment with a lot of the solutions, right? I mean, imagine trying to get someone to use a crypto wallet and first they got to download this thing. There's some technical barriers there, and then they have to on-ramp some fiat to crypto to ETH or whatever it is. It's just, there's too many obstacles in the way. It needs to be so much simpler.
That's exactly right.
I want to circle back, Andy. You said something that I found very interesting, which is that we're basically, the cost is already at or beating where credit cards are. I think the reason, so why hasn't this shift occurred already? I think it's because probably that cost is not being passed to the consumer. It's actually being passed to the merchant, right? So when I go and use my credit card, I'm not incurring that cost. The merchant is, and that's why a lot of these small businesses would prefer to just transact in cash.
Yeah, in fact, I completely agree with you. I would take it even a step further. It's not just that you aren't paying the fee yourself, the merchant's paying the fee. You're actually getting rewards, right? When you think about how the traditional financial system works and card networks work, when you swipe a Visa or a MasterCard or an Amex card or whatever it may be, you don't pay any fees. The merchant pays fees. And then a portion of the fees that the merchant pays obviously go to all the middlemen in the transaction, the issuing bank, the acquiring bank, the card network, all these different parties. But then also a portion of them come back to you in some form through rewards. And that's a really powerful driver of incentives, because then consumers want to use cards, right? You want to maximize your Chase points or your Amex points or your American Airlines miles or whatever it may be. And that then forces merchants to accept them because consumers want to use it. And that's a cycle. And so I think, one of the things that we're really thinking about here is, well, now we have this interface that is a seamless, easy, mainstream usable on-chain payments interface. How do we then build an incentive system that gets merchants to want to accept it? And a big part of that is just consumer adoption. If people want to pay with something, eventually merchants will offer it. But there's also questions of how you can incentivize consumers to do that. and what might make sense there. And so that's something we're spending a lot of time thinking about is, great, we solved this first problem, but I should be very clear here. We're incredibly proud of Beam. We think it's a very compelling product, but we are miles and miles and miles and miles away from the global financial system transitioning over to on-chain payments entirely. And there's a lot of things left that need to be solved in Beam itself, in merchant interfaces, in incentive systems, and all these different pieces. And so the road continues. We just got to our view internally is that we just got to the starting line on mainstream payments, including merchant payments being usable. And we're far from getting to the finish line. It's still so very early on.
You bring up a good point, Andy, with credit card incentives, and it begs the question, are Sky Miles the original airdrop?
Are Sky Miles the original I think they may be. Well, I think the original airdrop may have actually been, if you go all the way back, if anyone's read the history, it may actually be credit cards. Bank of America card, the first real credit card in the United States, literally mailed unsolicited credit cards to thousands of residents of Fresno, California. And just mailed them credit cards with credit limits, which, by the way, is now illegal, at least in the United States, to give someone a line of credit without them asking for it. But that's what they did. And all of a sudden, there were all these people in Fresno, California, it's a fascinating story, who had these cards, and Bank of America had gone and signed up a bunch of merchants who were willing to accept it. And that is how the credit card networks got bootstrapped initially, was through that. If anyone wants to read up on this, there's an amazing book called A Piece of the Action by Joe Nocera that I highly recommend. If you're working on building payment systems in crypto, you should also be reading about how the biggest payment systems in the world, in the traditional world, got built. And yeah, there was literally an airdrop of credit cards in Fresno, California, to bootstrap the network effects of spending on these cards.
That is fascinating. I did not know that, and I'm going to add that to my book list.
I was just gonna building off your Andy, your last point about this Beam being at the starting point of a long journey. Is there some parts of your roadmap that you can share? What are you guys focusing on the next 6 to 12 months?
Oh man, there is so much that we want to build. I mean, a lot of stuff relating to fee compression and how we can make the fees even cheaper. Stuff relating to how merchants accept payment and how you can enable merchants to do that much more easily. Supporting on-ramping. I think one of the biggest problems right now in the space, and this is something we're thinking a lot about, and if anyone listening has thoughts on this, we are all ears. I think this is not it's a problem for Beam, but it's a problem for the whole space that we need to solve. It's existentially important that we solve this. If you want on-chain payments to become massive, if you want people to be paying on-chain at merchants, paying each other, just transacting on-chain, the most broken part of that experience right now is getting funds from off-chain to on-chain. On-ramping from fiat to crypto is the worst part of the experience. And it's really hard. This is a hard problem. This is not a trivial problem to solve. I can talk about why I think it's hard, but I also just think that existentially it has to be solved. Because if we live in a world where it costs several percentage points to on-ramp from fiat to crypto, where there are delays, where there's really high friction, where all these things are true, we will just not get to on-chain payments for the masses because mainstream users will not want to pay those fees and deal with that friction when there are good enough, even if they're not as good, payment options available in the existing financial system. And so that's a really huge challenge that we're thinking a lot about at Beam is how we can help solve on-ramping. And I think it's a big problem. And there's just a ton of other stuff that we want to build. We want to think about cross-chain bridging and intelligently routing users' funds to account for congestion and opportunities. We want to integrate with other products and make it really easy to use many of the other amazing things built in crypto. We are really excited about ENS, which is already integrated via this thing called Beam Names in the Beam wallet, but we think could be even more decentralized with some work that the ENS core dev team's doing right now on ENS names on L2. We want to add messaging. There's a million things we want to do. So yeah, just at the starting line here on this product.
So I actually have a fun little anecdote about on-ramping because of where I live in Europe and because I'm somewhat nomadic and where my nationality and my passport and driver's license is not equivalent to where I physically am. I actually can't on-ramp to the blockchain. And I have to ask friends or my partner or whoever to basically send me crypto, right? I mean, and I'm not, I live in Europe, right? And I'm not a long tail kind of user, right? So this is, I a million times agree with that statement. Like, we need to fix on-ramping. This is it's a really broken experience. And I've talked to so many fiat on-ramps and nobody has seemed to like really be able to figure it out.
No, and I'll tell you part of the reason, and this is just for people thinking about it. I think it's an interesting thought experiment. Part of the reason on-ramping is so hard, it's not because there are brilliant people working on on-ramping in this space with building the best products possible. But the reason on-ramping is so hard is actually a structural reason. Because as Satoshi said in the Bitcoin white paper, to go back to that, pretty much every fiat-based or digital fiat payment system, whether that's credit cards or debit cards or wires or ACH or whatever, pretty much every single one of those systems to send money from the traditional financial system is reversible in some way. There are credit card chargebacks, there are ACH reversals. These payment methods can be reversed. But crypto payments, USDC movement or eco currency or any of these other things, those are not reversible. Those are on-chain, irreversible, and that's part of the beauty of the space, obviously. But you run into this problem. If you're an on-ramp provider and you are processing people paying you with a reversible payment method, and you are giving them back an asset that can be transferred irreversibly, you are opening yourself up to fraud, right? Someone can go and pay for USDC from you. You can give them USDC. They can transfer it away, totally own it irreversibly, and then they can do a credit card chargeback or an ACH reversal or something. And that makes it so these on-ramps, first of all, have to reject a lot of users for potential fraud because they're afraid of that fraud risk. And they also have to charge really high fees to account for that. And so this is actually at some level with the current kind of traditional on-ramp setup into crypto, just a straight up structural problem. That because of the way the existing financial system works and the way the crypto system works, there's kind of an incompatibility there. And so I think we need to find alternative ways to on-ramp people that can skip past that problem or solve it somehow in order for low fee, low friction on-ramps to exist.
That's very interesting. I hadn't considered the problem that way. It's sort of crypto is sort of a one-way road. And so it's trying to bridge that gap between the legacy system and the new one where you can't reverse these transactions.
That's exactly right. Off-ramping is easy. Off-ramping is easy because they can take in crypto irreversibly and then give you payment elsewhere. And so that's a lot of these services offer cheaper and easier off-ramping. But on-ramping is a really hard direction for them to service.
Fascinating. Well, I feel like we're close to winding up here. Vivian, Andy, anything you guys would like to add before we shut this thing down?
Yeah, I actually wanted to touch upon, I know it probably deserves like a whole other session, but kind of the TLDR on the Eco Association and as well as the currency that you guys are building, right? And like how Beam fits into that overall picture. I know we touched upon it a little bit, but if you can give like, the 1 minute summary of what that overall picture looks like.
Yeah, the quick version. Absolutely. So yeah, the Eco Association is an independent Swiss nonprofit, somewhat, similar structurally to the Optimism Foundation, tasked with supporting the decentralized eco-currency protocol. It's led by Annika Lewis. I think we've got Dave Clancy listening in, who leads growth and governance. And they're working on supporting this eco-currency protocol, which of course Beam technically supports as well. And the eco-currency protocol, I mentioned it briefly at the top, but it is an attempt to build a truly decentralized, unpegged, but usable payment currency on chain. And, if you look at the history of crypto assets, you'll see that there's basically two categories. There are assets that are independent, like Bitcoin and Ethereum, obviously unpegged, not pegged to fiat currencies at all, but not really usable as currencies. As much as I love both Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're not particularly usable as currencies because of their volatility and challenges there. And then there's this other category of stablecoins, which are incredibly usable for transactional purposes, obviously, but they are not independent. They're pegged to fiat currencies. They're not competitors to fiat currencies. They're alternative ways to move fiat currencies. And Eco attempts to create the best of both worlds, bridging those two things and building a decentralized payment asset, this token called Eco, which is governed by kind of an independent and decentralized monetary policy to be usable as currency, but without being pegged to a fiat currency. And it's effectively governed by kind of a decentralized central bank, a set of what we call trustees who are elected by the community to then govern the monetary policy. A little bit like if the Fed were elected by US currency holders. There's a secondary token in there as well called EcoX, which supports the governance of the system and secures certain applications and parts of the protocol. All of that probably beyond the scope of this discussion, but at a really high level, just seeking to build something that is independent, not pegged, but also highly usable to transactional currency. And so in some sense, competing with and providing an alternative to stablecoins in a much more crypto native way, true to the vision of independence and being untethered from any individual nation state.
Very interesting.
As a heavy note to end on, but that's the vision that we're working towards here. And we hope that products like the Beam wallet that make payments easier and give users options between different currencies, whether that's USDC or stablecoins pegged to different assets, or totally independent global currencies like ECO, can lead to a world where people are making more active decisions about the currency that they're using for payments. That's how it all ties together.
Yeah, and we've said it a lot here before on OP Radio, but if you're interested in these topics, we always recommend the best way to learn about crypto is just to get your hands a little dirty and use it. So with that being said, Andy, where would you direct the listeners to go if they want to, send one of these permissionless payments to somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would you can just go to beam.eco. That's the whole URL, beam.eco, and you will instantly have a wallet. You can send USDC or eco currency on Optimism straight to the address that is instantly created for you. Zero onboarding required, no app required, no download. It's as easy as going to beam.eco, and you can do that. And then if you want to learn more about the eco currency protocol and all of that, you can go to eco.org, and that's the website maintained by the Eco Association, talking with the eco currency protocol. And also maybe I'll look in the comments on this tweet about this space right here, and if a couple people post a screenshot of their Beam code from going to beam.eco, I'll send you a couple eco to try it out and try sending payments. So you can also fund your account from the fund account page via on-ramp partners.
There you go.
So
give it a shot.
One last thing. So we've actually had a bunch of requests from builders in our ecosystem wanting to integrate Beam into their application. What does the timeline for an API look like and some docs to help builders out?
That's a great question. That's one of the things that we're working on prioritizing right now. We want to open source it. We want to build docs that people can support it. But really the best way right now is just to reach out to us directly. You can either tweet at us at beam_eco or email us team at beam.eco. And I think true to the philosophy that I outlined earlier, it's unlikely that we will make the Beam wallet right away just able to connect to arbitrary dApps, because that kind of violates these guardrails and protecting users who are mainstream and kind of less savvy, less aware. So we'll probably start by building kind of, and we can do this with people support, purpose-built, specific, narrow integrations to let people do certain things. So if you're interested in that, if you're a builder who wants to work on that together and do it well as we open source or even before that, just ping us at beam_eco or me at Andy_Bromberg or email us team at beam.eco.
There you go. Slide in the DMs if you're interested in working with Beam. Well, I want to thank you guys both. This has been a very interesting conversation. So thank you, Andy, for coming on OP Radio. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and hope you all have a great rest of your week. We'll see you for the next one.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Mac. Thanks, Andy.
Bye.